Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Atheist Chef. Now let's get right down to it. G-Man. G-Man has made a video recently about the age-old saying, and by age-old, I think it's probably from when around Penn Jillette said it. The fastest way to make a person an atheist, make a Christian an atheist, is to let them read the Bible. Somebody else probably could have said it before him, but, whatever. That's the first way I heard it. Anyway, so G-Man. G-Man has basically tried to make a video about, why that's not true.
So why do people become atheists after they read the Bible? First of all, I would, the first thing that I would want to know is what did they read? What did they read in the Bible that caused them to not believe that God exists?
Now, for some part of this, I agree with G-Man. I don't think it's really proper to say that if you just read the Bible and you're likely to become an atheist. Obviously not, because it's still the most popular selling book of all time. There's millions of Christians out there, so obviously there's something missing. There's obviously an element that needs to be accounted for. That element is when you refuse to read the Bible wearing rose-colored glasses. When you refuse to look at the word and think that, well, obviously this word is perfect, obviously God has an explanation for it, and so I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm just going to assume that it is. When you look at it that way, then obviously, yeah, you're going to still stay a Christian. But if you look at it and go, I need to really figure out what's going on here because, I want to know the truth. I want to understand everything. I want to be able to understand it from the historical aspect, the contextual reasons for why things are happening, and just reading it and, assuming that being that God is not the author of confusion, then I should be able to understand it pretty straightforward. It shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be confusing.
If you listen to the stories of the atheists on YouTube that claim they became atheists because they read the Bible, one of the very first things that you'll notice about them is they'll look at, wow, I didn't know that was in the Bible. I didn't know that was in the Bible. This is condoned in the Bible. And it will stop them from continuing to read and continuing to study to get everything in context, trying to understand what it was saying in the original language compared to our language today.
And like G-Man pointed out, man, did I find some things that when I read it, I went, wait, hold on, wait, no, okay, wait, so you mean to tell me that God, just 5 seconds after telling Moses his plans about, Pharaoh and freeing his people, God gets pissed at him because he just figured out that he hasn't circumcised his son, and he's going to go over to the inn where Moses was staying, and he was going to kill Moses, but thankfully his wife came in with a flint, which is a really sharp rock, cut off his son's foreskin, and threw it on the ground at Moses' feet. I read that, and I was like, what the fuck? We didn't read that at church. What does that mean? And so, yeah, that obviously that you have to question what the hell's going on. Not really a morality, well, I guess it'd be a morality question, but just a strange what the fuck factor. And then you go try and see, oh, well, you didn't research it in context. Well, first off, there really isn't much context other than Moses didn't circumcise his son, God got pissed, Zipporah, his wife, took a rock to his son's penis and threw it on the ground. And that was the end of the story. And then it just went on like nothing ever happened. There's no context. There's no translation of words or anything that I missed out on that because I researched into that. That's pretty much straightforward what it is. Now, yes, there are some situations where you would need to know the context of the words and the meanings, and that can cause some difficulties. However, and as I'll show in more examples, context and the definitions of words ain't going to save nothing.
Okay? So the very first thing that you'll notice that they're questioning is the morality of the Bible.
No, actually, my first question was, wait a minute, serpents have feet?
Okay? They're looking at a God that they still believe in, that they still believe exists, as being an immoral God.
See, now here, Strawman, sorry, G-Man, G-Man, Strawman, G-Man, Strawman, G-Man, Strawman, G-Man, Strawman. Sorry, I have a hard time separating them sometimes. Okay, so G-Man is saying that when Christians read the Bible, or, they read the Bible for the first time, or whatever, or they're doubting their faith, that they start questioning the morality of God. Now, first off, it's not the first thing there is. There's about 19 billion other things that came to my mind when I was reading. Now, when I was reading, I didn't even really have to worry about the immorality of God because, I was just reading through and finding more and more examples of things that just didn't make sense, didn't add up. We can start off with like Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, where God said, "Let us make man in our own image after our likeness." Who is this our? The angels? Who is he talking to? That's weird, right? And then a little bit in chapter 3, Satan somehow manages to trick God into convincing him that he's a serpent. So God punishes the devil like he's a serpent. You must lie on your belly, crawl on your belly, and eat dust, which of course still doesn't even happen with the serpents. So he's wrong on two levels there. Then again in chapter 3, verse 22, we see God say, "And the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become as one of us, to know good and evil." Again, who is this us? And then you get on to animal sacrifices. Really? Why would God need an animal sacrifice? So you got all these other religions that have that as well. I get it. Who doesn't like the smell of barbecue? But what does this have to do with sin and forgiveness? Well, why would he choose such a barbaric system? It just seems odd. Then we have Noah's flood. We have basically the entire world is evil, and there's only one righteous man on earth. And so what is God's plan? He gets rid of all these people, but he allows 7 other people, Noah's sons and their wives, even though we have no reason to believe that they're fully righteous. He allows them to live and go on the boat, but yet they're not righteous. So why are they on the boats? If God's plan is to get rid of all the evil people, and then he allows evil people on the boat, then it obviously doesn't work. Didn't God see that coming? Didn't God see the fact that that would not work? Okay. The idea is it's the flood itself, and getting animals on the boat and blah blah blah. Super complicated, scientifically impossible without having to resort to supernatural stuff. Supernatural God placated the animals and he made them this way and he made the animals fit and be nice and whatever. Christians try to use it scientifically, try to make it scientifically possible, and it's just not. But if we want to resort to supernatural abilities of God, then God could have just supernaturally gave them a magic fucking heart attack and been done with it a long time ago. Then we read Noah, the one righteous man in the whole entire world. He's drunk off his ass, and then somehow his son, sees him naked, so he decides to curse him and to be a slave to, or his families or his sons would be a slave to all of his brother's sons. And God decided to allow that, but that's really whatever. Then you have the Tower of Babel, where God sees guys building up a tower to heaven, and he's like, "Oh my God, they're gonna be up here in heaven," which is impossible because heaven's not in the clouds. But even if it was in the clouds, those guys would have, not been able to breathe, thinning air and all. And if that was really such a concern for God, why do we have taller towers today that reach up that high? And why isn't God stopping them? Again, this just sounds like, somebody that didn't realize that God is not chilling up in the clouds. And then we see, God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. And so Lot's 2 girls think it's the end of the world, and they have to preserve the family line, so they get him drunk and have sex with him twice, 2 days in a row. So this is 20 chapters into Genesis, and we have 3 separate occasions where incest saves the day. With Adam and Eve that populate the universe, or the earth, and then Noah and his family populate the earth, and then incest again. Why does the Bible like incest so much? Genesis 27, Jacob tricks his father, Isaac, into giving him the blessing that once belonged to Esau by wearing like animal furs and crap to trick him. And then Isaac figures out that he's been tricked, and then he just carries it on anyway. Like, oh, well, it's too late. God's already convinced. And why the hell was God, tricked into this? Why would he give him the blessing? Okay. Then in Genesis 9, we have basically a baby-making standoff between Rachel and Leah fighting over Jacob, and they're just popping out babies left and right. Jacob goes sleeps with one or two, and they get 2 babies, and then the other one, Leah, gets 2 or 3 babies, and then I was like, well, I can't do anymore, so I have my servant and have sex with them, and then the other ones I give my servant, and they're just popping out the babies. Whoever makes the most babies wins. Okay. And then David fighting over Solomon's daughters. Solomon makes him go out and get 200 Philistine foreskins, so he goes out and kills 200 Philistines and gets their foreskins, put them in a bag, and throws them at Solomon. It's kind of fucked up shit that we don't read about in the Bible, read at church. And then we have the Moses and the 10 plagues. He kills the cattle 3 separate times, 3 separate events, and the Bible describes that it killed all the cattle, because 1 time isn't enough. He has to do it 3 times. They turned all the water to blood toward the very beginning. So for about a minimum of 11 days, there was no water in all of Egypt, because it was all turned into blood. But remember, the human body only lasts about 7 to 10 days without water. So I don't know how everybody hasn't died. And then all these other plagues killed, the cattle. All the plants in the fields. There was, volcanoes that came out and burned all the land. And so there was no food, no water, no plants. All the animals were dying, the horses, the cattle. And then despite all the horses being dead in 2 separate occasions from 2 different plagues, somehow the Pharaoh is able to leash out and send out pretty much all of his soldiers on horse-driven chariots. Do the math, okay? To go after Moses and company, and then they all die, in the Red Sea. So if we look at the Egyptian Empire, there is no water, no food, no land. 2.5 million of the Jews, the Jewish slaves, have just picked up and left the earth. Left Egypt. Sorry, not Earth. Left Egypt, and so basically they took out half of the economy and everything there. But yet somehow Egypt had no problem. They got by. The water was still blood. There was still no food, nothing, and still had locusts and all that crap all around. But yet Egypt was fine. Now you may say, oh well, they didn't report it or anything because it was embarrassing. Well, that's one stupid. They reported everything else. Secondly, as we all know, in the past 2 millennia, the last millennia of the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, they were in pretty much a constant conflict between the Assyrians, which is the Babylonian Empire, and the Babylonian Empire wanted to expand, and so did Egypt, so they were kind of always at ends with each other. And this would have been a perfect time for the Babylonian Empire to just kill everything. Actually, they wouldn't even have to try anything because there were no soldiers. They could just walk in and take over. But yet they didn't. So that's odd, right? Then we have to see that... Sorry. Checking something. Satan, at a certain point in Job, is up in heaven with God, even though he was banished from heaven. In Job 1:6, and he says, where have you been? He's actually reporting into God. It's like, oh yeah, I was just, going out the earth, doing my own thing. He's up in heaven with God, and we hear from Christians that God cannot stand to be in the presence of sin, or will not, or cannot be in the presence of sin. But yet, Satan is up there with God. Then we have, actually I don't have the the biblical reference, but we have the story of where there was a great famine throughout the land, and these 2 women were running out of food, and one said, hey, look, if we'll boil your son today, we'll eat him today, and then tomorrow we'll boil mine. And then it happens, and the first son gets eaten, and the second one, she hides her son because she doesn't want to eat her own son, and it's a whole story with Solomon, but still, women are boiling and eating their kids alive. And then also another reference where God afflicts an enemy tribe with hemorrhoids. And in order for them to be healed, they had to make golden statues of the hemorrhoids. God also gets credit in Psalms for slaying Rahab, which is also known as Tiamat, a dragon. It was originally famously credited to the Babylonian god Marduk for slaying, but yet we see it in the Old Testament and given credit to God. We also see in Psalms 105 where God has a distaste for figs, which of course we can see later on when Jesus curses a fig tree because it didn't bear fruit. I didn't have to go anywhere near God's morality to question the Bible and its validity.
Okay. The question now becomes is how can they worship this immoral God? Are you guys following me here? Okay. How then can they worship this so-called immoral God according to the person that's actually reading the scriptures? Okay.
So here's the thing, straw man. G-man. Now, we don't ask ourselves, why would I want to worship that God? I know I didn't. I can pretty much promise you most atheists that deconverted, or most atheists when they read it for the first time, or whatever, then what they do read is to go, wow, this is completely different from the God that all these other scriptures talk about. The Bible seems to be very contradictory about this definition of God, and God seems to be acting in a completely different way. I think that the God of the Bible is not being accurately portrayed by the Christians. So it's more likely that he doesn't exist because the way that he's defined is completely different from the way he's acting in the Bible. This is not a matter of will I worship this God or not. I just don't think he exists. At least that's how I saw it.
Then they begin to say, let me pick up a science book. Let me pick up the Bible. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that can't be confirmed with science. God can't possibly exist. Yes, these are the things that go through the head of an atheist when they're reading God's word, when they're reading the Bible. Okay? Because remember now, there's no science because the things that are being claimed in the Bible cannot be verified with science. Let's talk about some of those things. A talking donkey. Okay, I'm just keep it real here for a minute, guys. A talking donkey. Jesus walks on water, feeds 5,000 people with a couple of fish and a few loaves of bread, and then supposedly there's all these extras that are left. Okay, where all the baskets are full. Jesus speaks and the man rises from the dead. He doesn't give him medicine. He doesn't go to him and perform heart surgery on him or anything like that. He just rises from the dead. Okay, there's a lot of things that happen in the scriptures, like God parting the Red Sea. Okay, manna coming down from heaven. And a lot of these things cannot be verified scientifically according to the scientific community. Okay, the atheist doesn't consider, or the person who's about to become an atheist doesn't consider what he's looking at is supernatural acts done by God. And they're expecting that these supernatural acts that are going to be done by God can be verified by science.
Once again, straw man, and no, I'm not even going to bother correcting myself. You're wrong again. See, all of these examples that you gave out, like you said, were supernatural events. Now, of course, a person is going to say, I don't think these events really happened, but they are fully, capable of understanding that these are supernatural events that God has done and, of course, cannot be verified by science. However, there are a few scientific claims that do defy the scientific understanding of things that were not necessarily because they're supernatural, because they defy the evidence. Completely different things. The things that we look at that tend to defy the scientific evidence deal with, the light was created before the sun, the moon is a source of light, if you cover a bird in bird's blood, it's used to remove leprosy in a house, a bat is a bird, stars are just twinkly little lights in the skies. In Revelation, stars will come down from the sky and rain down and destroy about a third of the earth, which we know that a star is the sun, and if we fall onto the earth, we would basically be engulfed. Let's see. The earth and heaven are on pillars. The earth is center of the universe. Rabbits chew their own cud. All animals will fear humans, which is something that they apparently the lions, tigers, wolves, blue whales, and sharks all didn't get that memo. Diseases were all controlled by demons. All of these unscientific things that are in the Bible. I don't even have to worry about these supernatural things. Just these things that the Bible does claim to be true aren't.
Are you guys following me here? Okay. And because these things cannot be verified with science and through their logic and their reason, which they believe is valid, okay, and not flawed, it causes them to lose their faith that God exists.
If the Bible was completely perfectly accurate and there had no contradictions and no bad scientific claims or anything like that, then maybe you would have an argument. But so far, yeah.
Tell me something. How would your science books explain? Let me think of something here. How would your science books explain Jesus walking in the middle of the ocean?
Science doesn't really have much to say on the matter, except we've had no experience of anybody walking on water. Now, historians, we can say, oh, look, if we look at the stories of Orion in the Aeneid, some Native American stories and some Hindu stories, especially one, the Huang Po story, all those people claim to have walked on water. All of those, for the exception of the Native American stories, were before Jesus. Do we claim those to be true? Can we claim what happened, if they really did walk on water? We can say that most likely not, but even if they did, then Jesus' walk on water is not very special.
How would your science books explain God utterly destroying Sodom and Gomorrah with fire coming from the sky?
Volcano.
How would you explain? Excuse me, my ear itches. How would you explain Jesus Christ being crucified, being dead, okay, rising on the third day and ascending back to heaven?
Again, much like the walking on water and volcano thing, we can say, well, probably didn't happen. But, of course, again, even if it did, we'd have to take all of the other dying and rising gods, which is at least a good quite a few of those in history that existed before Jesus as well. So,
according to 500 witnesses, well, I guess you could say we have more than 500 now, considering that was a long time ago into today. Because you could say it's up in the millions or even the billions.
I don't think you understand what a witness is. And even if there was a first-hand witness, none of them decided to write about it. And secondly, even if they did, well, we have many more eyewitness accounts of ghosts and aliens.
Shouldn't you go and find a spiritual explanation on why these things happen? Why in the world are you going to are you comparing science with this? I mean, have any of you atheists paid attention to what you have rejected to what you actually buy into now?
So, G-Man, tell me which book I should use to actually better understand this supernatural world that, that science cannot explain. Should I use the Bible? Should I use the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, the Quran, the Talmud, the Jinashadaki, Zhangji? Which one? I mean, there's so many other ones. There's so many books that have a supernatural elements to them and have supernatural stories that science, can't explain. Which one should I listen to?
You're basically, well, I'll save that for another video. But science seems to be your.
Oh, go ahead, straw man. Say it. Say God. Oh, I want you to say God so badly. Please say God.
Your foundation on how you try to prove everything.
He only said foundation. I was really hoping he was going to say God. But look, again, as I said, Tower of Babel, bad evidence, the logically inconsistent, and rubbing birds on birds to cure leprosy, bad science, bad evidence. Yeah, I think when the Bible says crap like that, I can understand why we would not use that as our source for understanding the world around us.
You guys cannot see how deceived you guys really are. Okay? Be honest. For those of you out there who claim you read the Bible and you lost your faith, it had to do because you questioned the morality of God. You wonder, wow, how can I worship this God? Let me try some other religions. And then you allow thoughts to enter your head. Well, how do I know this God even exists? Let me go to my science books and see if any of this stuff is possible with the science books that I have.
This is just a brief summary of what G-Man is claiming, but hopefully I've shown that he's completely off base. I don't know if it's intentional or just a lack of understanding, but it's a complete misrepresentation of the thousands upon thousands of atheists like myself. How reading the Bible turned them into an atheist. We did not just question God's morality and decided that we don't want to worship him, and then decided that maybe he doesn't exist. We just simply decided that we're not going to read the Bible with rose-colored glasses. So that's it, folks. Thanks so much for watching. This is the Atheist Chef. Peace. That God is not the author of confusion, then I should be able to understand it pretty straightforward. Shouldn't be that difficult. Shouldn't be confusing.
If you listen to the stories of the atheists on YouTube that claim they became atheists because they read the Bible, one of the very first things that you'll notice about them is they'll look at, wow, I didn't know that was in the Bible. I didn't know that was in the Bible. This is condoned in the Bible. And it will stop them from continuing to read and continuing to study to get everything in context, trying to understand what it was saying in the original language compared to our language today.
And like G-Man pointed out, man, to read the Bible wearing rose-colored glasses. When you refuse to look at the word and think that, well, obviously this word is perfect, obviously God has an explanation for it, and so I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm just going to assume that it is. When you look at it that way, then obviously, yeah, you're going to still stay a Christian. But if you look at it and go, I need to really figure out what's going on here because, I want to know the truth. I want to understand everything. I want to be able to understand it from the historical aspect, the contextual reasons for why things are happening, and just reading it and, assuming that that's not true.
So why do people become atheists after they read the Bible? First of all, I would the first thing that I would want to know is what did they read? What did they read in the Bible that caused them to not believe that God exists?
Now, for some part of this, I agree with G-Man. I don't think it's really proper to say that if you just read the Bible, you're likely to become an atheist. Obviously not, because it's still the most popular selling book of all time. There's millions of Christians out there, so obviously there's something missing. There's obviously an element that needs to be accounted for. That element is when you refuse. Did I find some things that when I read it, I went, wait, hold on, wait, no, okay, wait, so you mean to tell me that God, just 5 seconds after telling Moses his plans about, Pharaoh and freeing his people, God gets pissed at him because he just figured out that he hasn't circumcised his son, and he's going over to the inn where Moses was staying, and he was going to kill Moses, but thankfully his wife came in with a flint, which is a really sharp rock, cut off his son's forehead. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Atheist Chef. Now let's get right down to it. G-Man. G-Man has made a video recently about the age-old saying, and by age-old, I think it's probably from when around Penn Jillette said it. The fastest way to make a person an atheist, make a Christian an atheist, is to let them read the Bible. Somebody else probably could have said it before him, but, whatever. That's the first way I heard it. Anyway, so G-Man. G-Man has basically tried to make a video about,